Hello, hello. My name is Dr. Rachel Gainsbrugh, and I am obsessed with all things short-term rentals, revenue streams, and helping you navigate your career, real estate, and your busiest and most wonderful seasons of life. So grab your coffee, get comfortable as you get ready to learn and grow with me. This is the Luxury Short-Term Rental Doctor podcast. Welcome to the Luxury Rental Doctor Show. Today, I am so excited to introduce to you Dr. Daa'iyah Cooper, based out of Baltimore, Maryland. She is an emergency medicine physician turned creative real estate investor and coach. She leads an amazing group called the Sister Docs in Real Estate Investing community, where she is guiding Black female medical professionals in real estate investing. Her expertise spans creative financing, long term residential rentals, and she empowers women of color towards financial freedom. As a certified business coach, she also helps clients grow real estate focused businesses. Dr. Daa'iyah Cooper, welcome to the show. I would love for you to share a little bit about yourself in your own words and tell us a little bit about your journey and your mission.
Yeah. Hi, you guys. Thank you so much, Dr. Rachel, for inviting me to your platform. You know, I just love seeing everything that you're doing, and I am just happy to be invited to the conversation. But yeah, hi, you guys. I am Dr. Daa'iyah. I always tell people I'm a recovering ER doctor. I retired early from clinical medicine. I resigned back in the fall of 2022. I'm a full-time landlord, real estate investor, and creative real estate investing coach. And so, yeah, so that's what I do. I don't know how much you want me to say, Dr. Rachel.
No, I mean, we can dive in. We were just in the green room, and I was like, you know what? Let's just turn this recording on because I want this to be as organic as possible because we're just vibing and talking about, what we're seeing in the marketplace right now. I do want to give everyone just like a jump start, and let's talk about the elephant in the room, Dr. Daa'iyah. The elephant in the room right now is interest rates are high. How do I even get started with real estate investing? And what I think is
Ooh,
powerful about what you have
yes.
to offer is some solutions in this current climate.
Yes, yes. Oh, thank you. I could just like bite on that. I love that topic, talking about the high interest rates because it is such a stressor for so many people. And there's a lot of propaganda, I feel, in my opinion, going on around on the interwebs and on the socials. And rightfully so. I don't necessarily think all of it is fear mongering, but I think there is a lot of not necessarily miscommunication, but an incomplete picture of what's available to your listeners and to the people that I love talking to real estate about. And to that point, I actually just finished hosting Create Your Own Market Summit because I was just tired of hearing everyone say, "Oh my God, the market is so bad." I'm like, forget that. Let's just create our own market. Um,
Yeah.
and what I mean by that is that you have the ability to figure out ways that you can buy properties where the interest rate, the average interest rate of banks or commercial lenders or residential lenders, the average rates at that time, that month, that year do not even matter. Okay.
Mhm.
And so it's my duty to educate as many people as possible that you can create your own interest rates, you can create your own down payments. Everything is negotiable in real estate investing. I focus in on residential investing, but whether it's residential or commercial, everything is negotiable. And don't be afraid of what you hear about interest rates. Now, does that mean go and spend too much money in buying property? No. But what it is more about a perspective shift of, oh man, I can't buy right now versus how can I buy right now? And so that's why I like to instill into the people that I talk to about interest rates, and especially like my clients and all the ladies that are in my circles. It should be more of a perspective of, man, I can't buy right now, it's too expensive, versus how can I buy?
Oh, I love that. And so we're already diving in and we're talking about the nuts and bolts and the juiciness of creating your own market. I had to write that down. I was like, that's a bar. I'm writing that down. And I love it because I feel as though this is exactly what we did with the midterm rental investing space. We had to create that market
Yes, come on,
based
Dr.
on
Rachel.
Yeah, based on the need there. So, and I love it's that philosophy of everything's figure outable, right?
Yes.
Let's
Yes.
negotiate, and there's,
Yes.
somebody's pain could be solved by a strategy that you present them. So can
Yes.
we dive in first before we dive in? I'm jumping the gun, but I'm really intrigued by the fact that you're a recovering doc. I know you're in academia as well, or are you still in academia?
I was when I left emergency medicine. I left academia. I left all seeing patients.
Goodness.
I do want to keep up my skills, so I want to pick up
Yes.
some shifts. But I've just been so busy with trying to
Same.
show all the Black women professionals that there are no barriers to successful real estate
Yes.
investing. So I've been so busy
Yes.
doing that and serving people that I haven't been working. But it's on my to do list. It's on my to do
Same,
list.
same. I'm with you as well, and I love that you shared that you just had an event. Now, was that in Texas? I think I saw it somewhere. I was like, oh, this
No,
must have
actually,
been Texas.
I was giving creative real estate gems back in Texas at a Boss Doctors
Okay,
conference. That was amazing. You have
the
to
Boss Doctors. I
Yes, you
saw
have to check that
that.
out. But no, I
I
did a
need
virtual
to.
mini summit. It was like a
Oh,
half a day,
so
just a
we can
few
watch
hours.
it
It
from
wasn't
anywhere.
that yeah.
Yeah.
Where that was the Create Your Own Market Summit, and I talked about
Hmm.
creating your own interest rate, creating your own down payment.
Ooh.
Yes, yes, and it all these things are, like you said, figure outable. So
Yeah.
I'm just wanting people to know that they have options. They have options, and they don't have to wait.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so in today's competitive market, I know that I'm also hearing that, well, there are no properties. The realtors are saying, the pundits are saying there's no properties. So, what do you say to the busy doc that's, fighting for their life in the emergency room streets, and they're
Yes.
driving home and all they hear are these sound bites? What do
Yes.
you say to them, Dr. Daa'iyah?
Yeah. And that's so funny because that was another part of the mini summit is create your own inventory because
Ooh.
because there's this propaganda that there's no inventory. And
There's
is
no
that really true? Is that true? Is there really no inventory?
I'm
Because I drive
I'm
down the street.
acquiring, I'm actually building one, so I'm not seeing
I don't
that
know if
per
that's
se,
really
but
true. Yeah,
right.
exactly. Because when we're like people like us who are actually out here doing it in real life, I'm like, I drive down the street all the time and I see empty properties, especially where
Ooh.
I am in Baltimore. There's tons of vacant. But
Yeah.
also, my clients are buying property. They don't have a dearth of inventory. The thing is, what I want people to know is I am not against traditional finding properties on the traditional market.
Yeah.
For anybody who follows my stuff, I'm always talking about creative financing, creative investing. But just because I refer to creative investing a lot, including deal sourcing, um, I am open to finding deals traditionally with using a realtor or agent. However, the importance here is that you just have to add more tools to your toolbox. And one of those tools is how to source deals off market. And so I think there's so many people, especially professionals, who, because they are busy, they are thinking that they have to use an agent, they have to go out and they have to have someone go out and actually find the properties for them. But just like they learn how to become respiratory therapists, doctors, nurses, whatever profession you're in, you can take just a fraction of that time to learn strategies of how you can find properties without your agent. I want you to be able to empower yourself to find deals whether you have a middleman or not.
Okay, I love it. And I know that we're seeing some interesting happenings inside of the real estate agent world as well,
Yes.
right? With the
Yes.
NAR lawsuit. This is not a
Yes.
conversation that I've had with any guest as of yet, but I'm sure
Mhm.
that's impacting uh,
Yes.
what we call it, the enthusiasm
Yes.
that
Yes.
some of
Yes.
the agents may have in the space. What are your thoughts about that?
So I think, to my knowledge, and again, I'm someone who doesn't always work with agents, so
Hmm.
it
Yeah.
doesn't seem like a huge limitation to me. But to my knowledge of interacting with other investors, interacting with agents, I see that it could potentially affect things down the line. But I think in the short term, it's not having a huge effect, especially
Mhm.
since we're about to come into this hot season in the summer when people are buying property. Now, it may be just that the buyers, especially traditional buyers, are going to be more willing to foot extra parts of the bill. But I don't think that this is going to run away a lot of the seasoned agents. Maybe some of the newer people who are thinking about getting their license and adding
Mm.
that to their repertoire. But I think the seasoned agents are not concerned at all significantly about this new change with the NAR.
Okay, yeah, I love this conversation because, as we know, real estate is cyclical, right? And it's having access to the tools, like you mentioned a little bit earlier. Are we going to work with, a traditional agent on the MLS? Are we going to look at fix and flip strategies? Are we going to do value add? What type of strategies or acquisition mechanisms do we have in our tool belt? And I think it's also very important to
Mm-hmm.
know, well, how do I take down this particular deal? Because
Mm-hmm.
I, the reticular activating system, once you start thinking about real estate investing, right? And once you start surrounding yourself in that community that is talking about real estate investing, it's inevitable that a deal is going to cross your path, and it may not be a textbook perfect deal. Are you going to let that deal just pass you by because it's not textbook perfect? So my question to
Yes.
you is, what are some of the common creative financing deals that you have structured? Let's
Mm-hmm.
give let's put the people on
Yeah.
a couple
So
of
I want to talk a
strategies.
little bit too, and I'm glad you posed that question because I want to backtrack and say,
Hmm.
although I lean into and love talking about creative financing in general, I like to speak about creative real estate investing just as a general umbrella term. And what I
Hmm.
mean by that is not only just the financing part of it, but
Okay.
the way you source the deal. So creative financing, but also deal sourcing non-traditionally, as
Okay.
well as non-traditional exit strategies, which that's why I love, following you and learning from you because you lean into specific types of non-traditional exit strategies. And when I mean exit
Yes.
strategies, I'm and I don't know like your audience, but I'm using that term meaning how I'm
Yeah.
going to create money or make money from my asset. And so that's
Yeah.
called an exit strategy. So although I love talking about creative financing and definitely can jump into that, when I am referring to creative real estate investing, I mean how you're sourcing those deals, how you're financing those deals, and then how you're creating money, bringing in money from those deals because it may not be a traditional tenant or a
Hmm.
tenant at all.
Yeah.
Even with residential property, you may not even be making money with a tenant at all. That's another conversation. But as far as creative financing, some of my favorite things to do is my main favorite things to do is seller financing, where I love taking the opportunity to have the seller hold on to the note and be my bank. And in those situations, you can negotiate with that seller. One, you can negotiate the purchase price. Two, you can negotiate the interest rate. Three, you can negotiate the down payment, if at all. You can negotiate the term length of how long you'll be paying that person until you give them a balloon payment or balance, another term for that. Um, you can negotiate when you start making the payments to them. Everything is negotiable. And the great thing about that, some people will be like, well, why would a seller want to take, and hold the
You
note
already
instead of
know that was
just,
my next question. Yep. Hmm.
instead of getting a big lump sum of cash? Why would a seller want that? Well, there's a couple different things. And it's so funny because I see this on a regular basis with my clients. And at first they don't believe me. They're like, no, sellers want money. And then now when we have recaps and feedback sessions, they're like, and all they were caring about was getting rid of the property. They didn't care about wanting a lump sum of money. So it just depends on the situation. Oftentimes there are sellers who they like the idea of monthly income. They like the idea of not having to go out and kill what they eat and making sure they get lumps of money all the time. They're like, if I can just get regular installments of lower amounts of money and then I can just add that up over time, to me that is actually safer than having to always struggle to get large lumps of money. So there are sellers like that. But once they've realized, they're like, I don't know, this tenant life is not for me. I want to get rid of the property, but I did like that money coming in every month. I don't want to deal with that tenant. And you can come in. And again, I talk to my clients about being ethical investors who provide solutions for people. And so the client or an investor can come in and actually take that property off that person's hands, have them no longer worrying about tenant, but they are still able to give them monthly income. And so that's one reason a seller will sell that way. Another reason is depending on their tax basis, right? Sometimes they're in a tax situation where if they go and sell that property for a lump sum of money, they're going to have a huge capital gains tax bill, especially if it wasn't their primary home, right? And so having the ability to sell that on what is also called an installment sale, where they are taking money monthly, they're taking their gains monthly instead of in one big lump sum, then they're not getting that huge tax bill that they were concerned about. And so that's another huge reason why sellers will sell that way.
So good, so good. And I think you've covered a lot of the objections that I've heard with the creative finance. And I think oftentimes, you know how we're told, and I know you do coaching on a variety of platforms. We're told don't count other people's pockets,
Whew.
and it just dawned on me, Dr. Cooper, maybe we're not supposed to count other people's reason for wanting to exit,
Yes,
right? Because
yes,
my reason for
yes,
wanting to exit is going to be different from yours and someone
yes,
else. So
yes,
that's
yes,
that's the limitation, right? It's like, oh,
yes,
I would want a full cash
yes.
offer. So I'm thinking that's what they would want as well. We're not supposed to count other people's
I'm glad
exit
you
strategy.
said that,
Let's talk
Rachel,
about
Dr.
that.
Rachel. I'm glad you said that, Dr. Rachel, because that same assumption that we or our, people in our circle, our potential buyers are making, sellers make those same assumptions as well. They're like, man, I didn't update it. I didn't, go and put new cabinets in here. So I'm not going to be able to get top dollar for this. And so,
Right.
you know what? I'll just take, just a low ball offer just so I
Yeah.
can just get this off of my hand. So they may be making some similar
Mm.
assumptions on their end, but when you
Yeah.
come in as a solution creator, which is what I want all the people who follow me, my dynasty builders is what I call them, to
Yes.
be, when you come in as a solutions creator and you're like, you know what? How about I'll give you more than what you're asking for? If you, in
Mhm.
exchange, you would decide to take some of that profit in a delayed form. And they're
I
like,
like
well,
that.
I'll get more. I can get more than a low offer.
Yeah.
And so that is a way that you would structure that. And
Mhm.
oftentimes you will be happy to give extra if you are not paying that full balance on that property right now, or even this year,
Mhm.
or even next year, because now you can ride the wave of that appreciation. And then when you do give that balance, you
Mm.
have not only forced appreciation, but then there's inflation as well.
Love that. Love that so much. So, my question for you, and I think words are very important. I jotted this down, and this is something that I'm starting to see bubble up to the surface with certain communities. And I'm so grateful for Capital Dynasty, for your entire community, where you are looking to empower women of color to get into these strategies because we understand the club that it was predominant in the real estate investing realm, but you said something that struck me. You said ethical.
Yes, we want to be
Ethical. You
ethical
want to provide
investors out here.
ethical investors, you want to provide ethical solutions. Why do you feel the need to have to say that? Because I know that, some strategies are getting a bad rap because of the lack of the ethics there. Can we talk about that for a minute?
Yes, that's so big. Thank you for bringing that up. Especially since I lean into creative real estate investing, where I may not be using an agent, I may not be using someone who has the status of a realtor, right? And so, because I may not be using those. Even if I am using them, but especially if I am not using an agent or a realtor, they have a fiduciary responsibility to the client, to the seller, or to the buyer, whoever they're helping. And so I don't want anyone who follows me to think just because I may or may not be using agents means that I am trying to avoid a responsibility to do what's best for a client or a seller. I just mentioned how oftentimes I will offer them more than what they're asking for, and they will be shocked, like, "Oh, I didn't know I can get this much." Yes, you can, but there's a give and take. What I believe in is if we are ethical investors, everyone involved in the deal can make money in that deal, can get something out of that deal, whether it's the seller, whether it's a wholesaler you're working with as a middle person, whether it's an agent you're working with as someone who's brokering that deal as a middle person, as well as me being the buyer. So that's what I mean when I mean being ethical. And the reason why it's so important is because sometimes people confuse creative for taking advantage, and I don't
Yeah.
believe in that at all.
Awesome. And I know we kind of diverted the path a little bit. So you've mentioned the seller financing as your absolute favorite, your
Yes,
go-to.
yes,
What is
yes.
the difference? I'm hearing subject to all day, every day on my feed.
Yes, I love subject
Subject
to
to?
deals. Yeah, I
Yeah.
just
Can
had
you
a
tell
couple
us a little bit
clients
about it? Yeah.
close on subject to deals recently,
Love
and
that.
those have been some of my favorite to close on. The reason why I don't put them at the top is because, again, being an ethical investor, when people try to go out and do this without like help and support from someone like me who's done it multiple times before, they could harm someone. And I'm a physician, so I also
Mm.
take that oath of first do no harm. I take that oath in
Yes.
medicine, but I also, kind of like take that over into this real estate life of mine. And I don't want to harm anyone. And you definitely can harm someone if you are doing subject to deals without knowing what you're doing. But let's just backtrack a little bit and define what that is. So when
Okay.
you're buying a property subject to the existing mortgage, liens, encumbrances, it's called subject to colloquially, but the true phrase is you're buying a property subject to the existing liens or encumbrances. Usually that lien or encumbrance is a mortgage, but sometimes it could be some other type of encumbrance like a mechanics lien, a child support lien,
Mhm.
different types of encumbrances. A grant, like a local grant. I've had a client who bought a property subject to, and not only did it have a mortgage, but the seller also had a special grant on that property that she was able to get as a new homeowner. So my client bought that property subject to that existing mortgage, but as well as that grant. So if that person sold, it became a loan. So it was no longer a grant, it was an actual lien, right? So those are examples of liens that are not mortgages. Um, so buying a
Interesting.
property subject to an existing lien or encumbrance. And so the beauty in that is that you as a buyer, as the investor, you, especially in this season of high interest rates, you can create your own interest rate by going and find someone who has a mortgage on their property that they're trying to sell. And that mortgage, if it was before April of 2022, because I remember that month very well because I was doing a refi and the interest rate shot up. So I will never forget that month, April 2022. So if someone has a mortgage before April 2022, you can imagine on an investment property that it is likely less than 7% interest rate, or if it was their primary home, it may even be in the fours, threes, 2%. So the advantage to the investor is that they can actually go and take over that mortgage, step into the role of that seller and have that lowest interest rate and have those favorable terms. Oftentimes these are a lot of times fixed rate mortgages, lower rates than what you would get now if you went and got a new loan on a property from a lender or a bank currently. The other thing too is still the equity. It's something that you don't necessarily have to pay that in one lump sum down payment. You can do a hybrid where if they have equity, you can actually sell or finance the equity to them as well. So everything is negotiable.
Interesting. Yeah.
Everything is negotiable, right?
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
oftentimes textbook though, a lot of these sellers, because most people are like, okay, Dr. Ade, I'm hearing you, but I don't know if that's really true, because why would a seller sell their property that they have, um, you know, ready to go, why would they go and sell it to you by having you take over their mortgage, which is risky to them? Because the
Yeah.
mortgage does stay in that seller's name. The mortgage stays in that seller's name, but the deed goes to the person who's buying, or the entity who's that is buying this property. And so many people are like, I don't know if that's really something that people do, but they will. Because textbook is, the example would be a seller who doesn't have equity or may even be underwater. And so if they went to a traditional agent or traditional market and tried to sell this on traditional market, the MLS, they would have to bring money to the table. They would have to pay to sell their property, right? Because they have no equity. And because the agent needs to get paid and their closing costs, right? So oftentimes they're like, man, I don't want to have to pay money in order to get rid of my property. And oftentimes those people maybe they just got a divorce, and so now they went from two incomes to one and they just can't afford it anymore. Maybe they're in the military and they have to go ship out somewhere, or armed forces or something like that. Or maybe they were buying it with someone who was not their partner, and they can't afford it anymore. Or maybe they just had a financial hardship, they lost their job or something happened and now they can't afford the mortgage. But they bought it maybe in the last 5 to 7 years with a low down payment loan, and we know that you haven't paid much principal into a property within that time period. So that is an example of how someone can easily come into a financial hardship and they don't have a lot of equity. And so in those situations, they would be like, yes, please come take over my mortgage payments. Now, if people are following me, then they are probably thinking, okay, now why would you buy a property? Why would I buy a property that has no equity? That sounds silly. Um, and I understand that question. But if it cash flows, and it depends on the type
Yep.
of investor.
That part. Yes.
It depends on the type of investor you want to be. I don't
Yeah.
assume that everybody's a cash flow investor. I am. I made a plan to slowly replace my income over time.
Yeah.
But as a cash flow investor, if it cash flows hundreds or
Yeah.
thousands of dollars, I'm buying it every day, all day, and twice on Sunday,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm. I
And
love it.
so that is the reason. Now, I always like to make a point when I'm bringing up this topic of subject to let people know, because I don't think many people are talking about this. I also hear people talking about assuming mortgages. Those are not the same thing. So on subject to, the buyer will step into the role of the seller, um, by paying the mortgage, but they will not put that mortgage in their name as the buyer. The mortgage stays in that seller's name. So it is a risk for the seller, right? And so that's why we want to be ethical investors and buyers, so that
Yeah.
we are actually making those payments and we are helping to build up that person's credit who was defaulted or about to default on their loan. So we're helping them out. With an assumption, we actually are going to the bank and saying, hey, I love these terms that he or she has. I want to take over this loan and get my name on the loan and get their name off of the loan, but I want to assume the same terms. That's an assumption. That is different from subject to. Subject to, the buyer is not on the mortgage.
Got it. Now, I haven't heard the assumption as being extremely popular. Are banks really into that, or most likely
There,
not?
there are a subset of loans, just a few that are assumable,
Okay.
but actually most loans these days are not even
Or not?
assumable anymore. That was something that was more common decades ago.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
I often
Okay.
actually see it more so in commercial loans, to be honest.
Oh, okay. Okay,
Mhm.
that's good to know. I didn't know that. So that's good. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the financial side of it. If the sister docs in your community are looking to dive in, where are you seeing that the vast majority of them are coming up with those initial down payments or that
Yes,
initial
yes,
capital? What have you
yes.
seen as the most common ways for them to come up
It's been a
with the initial
mix.
capital?
It's been
Mm-hmm.
a mix, and it just depends because although I'm in Baltimore, a lot of people come to me for help in this area. I have clients in like Texas, New York, DC, like different places. So, one, it's good to know that, of course, the purchase prices vary,
Yeah,
across the country. But like I
yeah.
said, even I have people in DC, which is a high cost of a living there.
Yeah.
But it's important to note that when you are buying creatively, if you're taking over someone's mortgage or if you're doing seller financing, you don't have to worry about that typical 20 to 25%, sometimes 30% down payment, which is
Yeah.
typical now, especially post COVID with a lot of lenders for commercial loans. Um, Unless you're buying this as your primary home or you're buying it in your personal name, and oftentimes people don't want to do that, which I don't need to get into those reasons on this talk. But if you are buying it in an entity, oftentimes a traditional lender is going to want 20 to 25% down, even sometimes 30% down payment.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
so, one, whenever people are buying creatively, I have had clients who are putting 10% down,
Hmm.
5% down. I don't even think I've had anybody to go up as high as 15% down. Like a lot of my
Nice.
clients, they're all in is like 20%, like all in, like everything out of pocket, not just your
Nice.
down payment, your closing costs, everything like that. So that's one. So it's significantly cheaper. So before I even
Hmm.
mention, like where they're getting their funding sources, it's important to note that what they're paying is tens of thousands of dollars less than what it would be if they were going with a traditional lender. I don't want any smoke with my traditional lenders who listen. We work with you guys too, but we just,
Absolutely.
keep tools in our toolbox.
Yeah.
But what I'm seeing is I've had clients doing HELOCs on
Yeah.
their homes, HELOCs on their investment properties.
Yeah.
It's That's a little bit harder to do. There's not as many lenders out there doing HELOCs on investment properties, but there are some.
Mhm.
People using their retirement plans,
Yep.
and people just using money that they had saved up.
Yeah.
And then some people are
I've
just
done all of
doing,
those things.
yeah, me too. Yeah, well,
Listen.
I haven't done the HELOC, but I've done pretty much all the different
Hmm.
things. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I've done traditional financing where I'm doing low
Hmm.
down payment loans,
Yeah.
renovation loans. I've done hard money. I've done private money. I've done
Yeah.
seller financing subject to. So again, I don't want people to think I don't do, traditional things. I just add those other tools to my toolbox.
And I
So
love that
yeah.
because everything is figure outable. And when I'm focused, I'm not taking no for an answer. So I'll keep calling and calling and calling. If I need to get through 89 different funding sources to get the answer I'm looking
Mhm.
for,
Mhm.
I'm going to do it. Whether
Yeah.
it's credit unions, local credit unions,
Yes.
some weird bank in
Yes.
Mississippi I found one day that was
Yes.
willing to do a deal with me.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know, so
Whatever
there's
works.
money everywhere, but
And
it's
I
just
want
a
to add
matter of
something to that, Dr.
go
Rachel,
for
too. Sorry to
it.
cut you off because when you said that, it made me think of something just to give your audience some free game. Um, and backtracking
Yes.
a little bit too on top of that. Although I've had clients who are closing with just their money that they've had saved,
Mhm.
or their retirement or investments and things like that. I've had clients who have secured private lenders but haven't had to use them yet. So I love
Nice.
private lending as well. But you
Mhm.
said something when you're like calling different banks that made me think of something else. A lot of people don't realize there are nonprofit lenders out here who will lend on you buying investment property. So there are certain organizations and institutions called community development corporations and community development financial institutions. And so that is another option. That's another creative. Let me give y'all some free game here.
Listen,
That's another creative
that's a
option.
bar. Thank you.
So it just depends. They usually have a central mission of like, oh,
Mhm.
I want to serve urban populations or I want to
Oh,
serve
nice.
underserved populations. So it just depends on where you are. You don't have to be in a rural area. They could have a mission to serve, urban populations, which may be near an area of development in whatever city you are in or what city you're buying in. And so they will typically fund to other institutions or sometimes individuals. It just depends. They have their own criteria. But if you can meet the criteria that whatever you are buying and renovating and putting out there is going to provide housing for people who meet that mission, or even if it's not providing housing for a certain type of person, but if you're building up a community that needs housing to be blighted houses to be turned into functionable homes,
Yeah.
then you also can get money from them. So that's just another little bit of free game there. If you look into community development financial institutions or community development corporations, or even just your local grassroots organization, you may say, hey, I want to go, and there's a block of properties in my city that just no one is like paying attention to. There may be some grassroots organizations there who are focused on urban development and community development, and they may say, yeah, we got money from the federal government and we can give you grant money to do it. So just keep those in mind. I'm really big about thinking outside the box.
Oh my goodness, I love that. And I'll definitely look into it. And for those of you who are listening, listen. Goodness gracious. Thank you so much, Dr. Cooper, for sharing this free game with us. So, this is not something I'm aware of. And it reminds me, it seems like it can kind of dovetail really well with the Opportunity Zone tax benefits that are out there as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't think about the SBA either. Because remember, as
Mm,
investors, we're business owners.
yes.
So, and again, I like creative exit strategies. So just because I might be buying a residential property doesn't mean that I'm necessarily renting or buying that and planning to rent that out to a tenant right now or even forever. You can use residential property for commercial uses, right?
Mm,
That, especially if it's a mixed use property, right? Um,
nice.
so even if you're not buying residential property, if you're buying commercial property, keep in mind that the Small Business Administration, they want to help you to build your business. And so they actually give mortgages as well. They give renovation loans, mortgages. So again, just free game, just outside the box. And just like people are just only thinking about a one track, they only have an idea of one way to
Yeah.
buy property, but there are so many ways out here to get it. And a deal is a deal.
Yeah.
When you have a good deal, money will come to you.
Goodness, I love it. I absolutely love it. Okay, so I feel like we've covered, all right, how do I find the money? Dr. Cooper has given us so much game on how to find the money outside of the box. The next thing is, okay, I've got this money, I've, put my situation together, but I want to rewind a little bit. Let's talk about deal analysis. Let's talk a little bit about market
Yes.
analysis. Like, how do
Yes.
you know that the deal is a good
Oh,
deal? What's
so
your
good.
favorite buy box, if you don't mind giving us a little
Yes.
high level of what
Yes.
that looks like?
Yes. Oh my goodness. And again, I'm someone as I guess coming from academics and in that teaching background and being a coach, I'm someone who likes to go high level all the time. I think a lot of times, and I made a post recently about so many people coming to me saying they don't know where to start. And one of the reasons they don't know where to start because they don't know how to analyze deals. And a lot of
Yeah.
times they don't know how to analyze deals because they don't know what they want. What is your
Mm,
why? So
yeah.
I am actually not big on saying, "Oh, I only look at cap rates or I only look on at cash on cash return or 1% rule." It depends on what your why is and your investment thesis. Me, I'm a cash flow investor. So a lot
Yeah.
of times I may not be concerned about the actual equations and things that show how much equity it's going to be built up from a property, right? I mean, I do like cash on cash return, right?
Yeah.
And I'm in an area where we can get high cash on, we can get like greater than 10%,
Nice.
especially here in Baltimore because everything is low cost. But when I'm counseling other people or when I'm coaching other people, I first tell them to start with what do you want? Some people come to me and they're like, will not quit my job. I love my job.
Yeah.
I just want to have money for 20 years from now.
Yeah.
And so that person may not be concerned at all about cash flow. So cash on cash return may not be as important, right? It
Yeah.
may be more so looking at the cap rates, right? It may be more so looking at the rates of appreciation in that region that they're in or the markets they're interested in. Other
Yeah.
people come to me and they're similar to me and they're like, no, I want to replace my income. Um, I want to create an extra 15K in the next couple of years. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. And so in those instances, I'm going to be saying, you know what, you can look at all this minutia and these formulas, but the bottom line is how much do you have to put into this property to get into it? What is your out of pocket cost? And how much will you get back every month? For me, I don't get up out of bed if I'm not just if I can't see at least $500 a month in cash flow, I'm not even like I can't even blink at it. But
Yeah.
even now, as someone who's not a new investor anymore, 500 is low. But I don't want to like discourage anybody who
Yeah.
who that's
Yeah.
their, yeah.
No, but
But
we've seen the, and we've seen I call them my burr bros, my burr bros. They're like $20 a door. Let's get 1,000 doors. Right? The
Dr. Rachel,
burr
you're gonna
bros.
get me in trouble. I don't
No, but the
see.
truth, we got to cut them before we heal them. The truth hurts, but first it will set you free because your investment has to make you want to get up out of bed, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I used to hear, when I first started, I used to hear the $100 per door, $200 per door. And let me tell you, that first leak that I had,
That sucked it right up.
that first
Listen,
leak, even with the warranty, right?
listen.
Um,
This is the
so
uncut version. Listen,
I'm
we took off the wigs. We're
like, listen, I don't want to get in trouble. But,
but
it goes back
reality
to,
check.
yes,
It's
it
a
goes back
reality
to the
check.
post that I made recently. So many people come to me and they're like, yeah, I want to get 20 doors. And I'm like, why?
Why?
Why do you want to get 20 doors? No, if, and there's nothing wrong if they have a good reason, but it's about
Yeah.
intentionality for me. When
Hmm.
I consult with people or when I coach people, it's about intentionality. So
Yeah.
I would rather you say, oh, I want to get 20 doors because I have a goal to
Mhm.
create housing in my community, and
Yeah.
the first iteration of what that community needs would be 20 doors. Okay, then that makes sense.
Yeah.
But if you're like, oh, I want to get 40 doors so I can
Yeah.
get $100 per door and I can have this amount of money coming in. I can't do that
Right.
calculation in my head, that's bad. But when people come to me and they're like, okay, I want to create an extra 15K, then I'm like, okay, we can work with that. I want to create an extra
Yeah.
15K because that would make me financially independent. So
Yes.
then I start talking to them about what is their risk, what their risk assessment is. I talk to them about what their capacity is. I talk to them about what their deal breakers are,
Yeah.
turnkey versus not turnkey. Do they want to do rehabs versus do they not want to do rehabs on their first ones? And then once they tell me all those details, and I'm like, okay, this is the strategy that we can go down.
Yeah.
And if you pick from these exit strategies, you can get from 500 to 4,000, 5,000 a month in
Yeah.
cash flow on your first purchase. So it all depends on the intentionality of where you're
Yeah.
going.
Yeah. 100%. And so, same thing with my community, Dr. Cooper. So we have, I have a couple individuals who are in their mid to late 70s.
Oh, wow.
So think about their why. They're not looking for 20 doors. They're not looking for, say, a ton of cash flow. They're looking for a lifestyle investment. Say
Yes.
they're a trauma surgeon. They're at the peak. That revenue's coming in. They're looking for a tax. Um, Offsetting their taxes, and they're looking for a place that now they have grands and great grands that everyone can come together, but they want the revenue during the times that they're not there to be offset by the expenses, so they're not huge on cash flow per se. They just want, so when you say that you go down that path of what is your intentionality, what is your why, that resonates so much with me because not all strategies are in alignment with every single individual. So when I was hanging around my burr bros and they're like, we're going for 100 doors, for 2 minutes, I got really excited. And then I started to get anxiety
Mhm.
because those 100 mediocre doors were not doing enough to excite me. And I thought to myself, why don't I focus on two or three magnificent doors? So I had to close the door on mediocre and then open the door to magnificent. And
Yes.
you know what? Less is more all day, every day. But like you said,
Yes.
intentionality. A 70-year-old's goals is not going to be the same as a 30-year-old or 40.
Yes.
They
Yes.
don't have to work. They may still want to work, every now and then. But
Yes.
for them, they're looking at legacy. They want to create some memories. One of them bought a 13-bedroom home, which I was like, I hate your numbers. I hate
Ah!
the numbers. But we created a plan and it was going to pay for itself. Chef's kiss. That's all he wanted.
Mhm.
That's all
Yes.
he wanted. I was like,
I love that.
interesting.
I
So
love that. That's
that's
beautiful. And that, I
right.
mean, you are double clicking on everything I'm saying. And I think I think people just get into the sexiness. Oh, I have 100 doors, and I used to fall into that. I'm gonna keep it real. Like, I'm
Me
not
too.
gonna
I
lie to
had
your
door envy
audience.
just like any other
Yeah,
girl.
I used to fall into that. I'm like, dang, I need to get like 10 more doors in the next one year. So I'm just
Right.
like, I used to fall into that. But then when I realized that I have no interest. Like, I self manage. At
Yeah.
first, I wasn't
Me
self
too.
managing, but when I started
Hmm.
self managing, I was like,
Ooh.
oh my God, Tim, I can't.
Mm.
I don't even want to deal with some of the people I'm dealing with now.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
I don't have that problem, but at that time when I was having this kind of like come to Jesus moment, I
Yeah.
realized that I don't like giving away 10% of my money. I want to keep all of my monies. And for
Hmm.
me to continue to keep that as well as live the life that I want to live where I can do whatever I want to do, I need to keep my portfolio small. And so that's when
Hmm.
I started leaning into the idea of a small but mighty portfolio and a
Yes.
diversified portfolio. So I
Yeah.
have some long-term rentals, I
Hmm.
have some midterm rentals. I've
I love
even
that.
just started trying to do the location rentals where
Ooh.
those people are not even spending the night at my house. They come, they're like, "Hey, I want to do a video shoot, hey, I want to come
Yes.
use this." And they're coming for hours and you can get thousands and thousands of dollars per month, right?
Yes.
And no one's spending the night in your house and you don't have to deal
Yeah.
with landlord tenant court.
Yeah. I love that.
There's so many ways out here to make money with your property.
Oh, so good, so good. Okay, so we talked a little bit about, your why, coming up with your numbers, your investment thesis. This is something that I'm so glad you brought up, guys. You're not going to hear this on a lot of podcasts. You have to have a thesis, for your investment strategy. And what it helps you with, I think, is the shiny object. Like whenever,
You're
when
like,
all the deals are coming by, it's like, wait, but what was my investment thesis? I said I
yes,
was going to do
yes,
this.
so
So let's
true.
stay the course,
I
right?
see so many people coming to me and they're like, "Yeah, I want to replace my income. I want to
Yeah.
replace my income." And I'm like, "Yeah, let's do it. Like, let's create a strategy plan for you." And even if I don't coach them, I still like that's a service I give is I help people create a strategy plan that's individualized
Oh,
to
that's
them.
wonderful.
And they're like, "Oh man, okay, I want to do flipping." And I'm like, "Wait a minute now. You said you wanted to replace your income. You wanted to replace your job, but flipping is a job because it actually it's not once you make that 50K real quick
Right.
or maybe 30K or whatever it is or maybe 100K and that flip,
Yeah.
you go and you pay your expenses, you buy the things that you want to buy, but to create that again you have to go and do another flip.
Yeah.
So again, it's all about intentionality.
Yeah.
It looks sexy, they talk about it on HGTV all the
Yeah.
time, flipping. um, but people start leaning into that as, oh, that should be my primary strategy. But then when you get down to the nitty gritty and ask them what their why is, they're like, no, I want to actually cut back on the actual work that I'm doing. I just want to
Yeah.
have money coming in every month. And I'm like, well, that's, you don't get that from flipping. Or people who
Yeah.
believe in ownership and they're like, oh, I've heard people doing the arbitrage model. Again, I don't want any smoke from
Yeah.
people who do
No, no, no.
arbitrage.
No, 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 no. The truth will set you free. There's a strategy out there for everyone. But if you come to Dr. Cooper and you say, this is your North Star, she's going to guide you there. There are things that will derail you from getting there, right? So I'm all about you guiding, to wherever that individual is. And so for years, honestly, I bashed arbitrage. I'm going to be honest, full transparency, guys. And you may not know my story, but I completely bashed arbitrage until one day I got an inquiry from an insurance company and they needed my property within 72 hours, and it was a $16,000 per month booking. I couldn't. My property, the mortgage was like 2,500. It was fully booked. And so I looked high and low. I said, "How can I close on a deal? Because I'm only purchase girl. Arbitrage, that's a hard no. There's no cash flow really. If we're being real with ourselves, guess who was on Zillow? And I found a rental property for $2,600. Stood it up in 72 hours and earned 16K per month for the next 11 months.
That's amazing, Rachel. And but
So
I love that. But that goes to what I'm saying about, again, people being short-sighted and kind of what we talked about at
Hmm.
the beginning of the call of about there's not like misinformation out there, but it's people are not telling the whole picture.
Yeah.
And it's all about adding extra tools to your toolbox. And I love being diversified
Yeah.
within your portfolio.
Yeah.
So you may do a
Absolutely.
little bit of arbitrage, you may
Hmm.
do mostly ownership.
Yeah.
Maybe you do some short term over here and some long term over here. I like the idea of being diversified within. So even the person who came to me excited about the flipping, I didn't tell them not to flip. I
Yeah.
don't tell actually any of my clients what to do at all. That's why
Yeah.
I'm a coach, not
Yeah.
an educator per se when it
Yeah.
comes to real estate. I tell them their options
Yeah.
and then let them make a decision. But
Yeah.
ultimately the plan that we created for her was to do a mixture of flipping and owning. So
Yeah.
that flip would be, the money
Cash
to
flow.
go and
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
buy more
The
property.
capital.
And
Hmm.
that way you're not just only leaning into the flipping and then creating a new job for yourself.
I absolutely love that. Another thing that has bubbled up in my world as well. So there's ownership, there's arbitrage, which it is that capital, that initial capital for some of our community. The third
Yes.
thing is a strategy called co-hosting, which is also known as
Mm,
property management.
mm,
So you're managing the bookings, and that's where the hype is. You get to start a business with nothing down, right? But it's like there's always a price to pay. There's no such thing as no money in it. And what I've had to educate, like you said, I don't tell people don't do it, but you're coming at me because you're burnt out, you're looking for a way to come back, and now you want to take on a co-hosting business with 17 properties and 17
Phew.
different bosses. You're right, so you you're trying to get rid of the one boss, but you just acquire 17 different bosses, right? And so what is your SOP? What do you have in place for your communication guideline to make sure they're not all texting you in the middle of the night? They're texting the guests because these are two
Mm-hmm.
night stays. Oh, they're trying to respond, you're trying to respond, and
Mm-hmm.
they want to know about the rug
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it is a
Yes.
job. It is a
Yes.
job. So how, if that's the path you want to go, I just need you to be clear eyed about it. But what is your SOP? What is your framework to ensure that you have guidelines on communication? You have a plan in place to ensure that you don't end up losing your your mind during that process. So
Yes.
it's
So
not just
true.
no money down, but there's a price to pay. Isn't
Yes.
that the
Yeah.
truth?
Oh, 100%. 100%. And even now, there are times where I've given the seller no money down, but I'm paying closing costs. I'm paying
Hmm.
to protect my asset before I renovate it. So I'm boarding up the property before I even close on the property. Things like there's always going to be costs. And
Yeah.
even if I am literally like having the seller pay closing in exchange for me not giving them something down, I'm still paying that person more than what they would have gotten, but I'm paying it on the back end, maybe a delayed payment or something like that. So there's always, you have to pay, like, this whole get rich quick and no nothing out of my pocket.
Yeah.
um I don't know of a situation where that exists. Maybe if you are going to be someone's business partner, but in
Yeah.
my opinion, you're going to have to provide value in some way, and you may
Yeah.
not be able to own that property outright if you're not
Yeah.
putting any money in it. And to
Yeah.
me, that
There
we
may
have
be
to we have
time
to do things correctly.
capital, some sweat equity. You're gonna pay some way. It may not be
Yeah,
monetarily, but there's gonna be some time spent.
yeah,
You're gonna grab a hammer, start learning how to paint.
yes,
Something's gotta
absolutely,
give.
absolutely.
So I want to round this out. I have so many more questions that I
Oh,
would love
sorry, and
to
I talk
ask.
too much too. You have to stop me,
No,
Rachel.
this is so good. I have like so much more that I feel like our audience needs to cover. So we definitely need to do this again. But something you mentioned a little bit earlier, you said you're managing your own property. So how does a busy woman like yourself who is out there training a community of sister docs and just really providing value, how do you find the time to manage your own property? What does that look like
Yeah,
realistically
yeah.
for some busy sister docs in our
So
community?
it's actually not hard. One thing that has really helped me is one that I didn't start doing it all at once. Like, I started managing, property going forward, but the ones that were behind me, I left,
Hmm.
manage. So that's how I started. And then two, around that time is when I started or stopped being afraid of renovations. So I actually enjoy
Mm.
renovations now.
Yeah.
And so when
Hmm.
I buy a property, I'm usually immediately updating it or doing a pretty significant renovation. And so from the beginning, there's not much that someone can call me on. Like, this is brand new HVAC, brand new MEP, like everything. I know you told me before, you're like, I try to stay away from stuff like that. But for me, I enjoy it. But because of that, I know what's behind the walls.
Yeah.
I am not concerned that they're going to call me for a roof issue, mechanical issue, plumbing issue. Um, so that buys me time. I know that it's going to be something simple. So that has helped me a lot as well. And then also, just again, creating systems, making sure, when things need to be updated, when filters need to be changed. And you don't need a fancy, like if you're just starting, I'm really big on people staying lean. So you don't need to like get a fancy rental software. Put that in your iPhone, like, reminders, or,
Yeah.
set some reminders on your computer. I'm really big on making sure that when you're starting out, you're staying lean. But those have been some of the things. The biggest thing is making sure that I'm renovating them from the beginning.
Oh, that is a gem right there. Because what that does is it really reduces your capex. So you've addressed the issues. You've preemptively. It's like a strike. I'm going to strike right
Yeah.
before they move in because it is difficult in
Yeah.
between tenants to get
I mean,
all
I
of that
still would
work
do
done.
that like 5% away, but I won't do a
Hmm.
10%. A lot of people, when they do their monthly, kind of expenses, and
Hmm.
again, I don't know like how the knowledge of everybody in your audience, but that those capital expenditures, usually
Yeah.
people are, just they're wanting to put away 10% of that rental income for capital expenditures like roofs and things like that. I still will put
Hmm.
away 5%, but
Nice.
um, I'm not worried about doing that 10, 12%
Yep.
when I know that
Hmm.
there's not going to be any issues for at least the next 7 years. There's probably not going to be any significant issues at all.
I love it. I love it. So let the people know, how can they find you, Dr. Daya? I would love for the community to dive into your sister docs community. Why don't you let us know
Yes,
how to find
yes,
you?
yes. So I am on LinkedIn at Dr. Daa'iyah Cooper, Daai apostrophe Iyah, last name Cooper, and I am on Instagram at Capital Dynasty, CapitalDynasty. And if you are a sister doc, you're a pharmacist, a physician, dentist, vet, all the different types of docs in the medical persuasion. We have a community over on Facebook, Sister Docs and RAI. It's searchable, SISTADOCS and RAI. And it's a community that I created because there were so many Black women who were doctors who seemed like they wanted a safe space just to talk about what they're doing. Um, a lot of times people had their own kind of brands and things like that, and maybe they were open to it, but a significant they were open to talking about their investments, but there were a significant percentage of ladies that I was coming across. They were like, well, I don't necessarily want to talk in groups where maybe my other colleagues or my bosses may be in those groups or things like that. As I'm building up, I want to have this place where it's people who look like me, and I'm like, sure. So I actually created that community for Black women doctors. But in general, like with me serving others, and you can see how I've served doctors, and especially on my Instagram page, I talk about some of those stories and those client testimonials. I
Yeah.
focus on curating spaces for Black women. I serve other people as long as they are open and know that my spaces are specifically curated for Black women, though.
I love that. Oh my goodness, Dr. Cooper, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your wealth of knowledge. This conversation has been incredibly enlightening. I hope you guys, as you're listening, feel free to listen again, rewind, because the gems were gemsing. That's the word that I could use. The insights were absolutely invaluable. Thank you for joining us today. And our audience, thank you so much for tuning in. So until next time, my dear friends, keep striving towards your goal. And remember, the right investment could be just around the corner. So be prepared. Bye bye for now.